Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue straight on till morning. Wendy makes a decision. This at least could be said about Snowball. The little thing curled up in Wendy's neck and breathed his soft wet breath on her cheek while she lay in her bed, dry-eyed and insensate. Nana sat loyally on the floor nearby, perhaps withholding her disdain for the new interloper in view of her mistress's distress. Ireland, Wendy finally whispered. I don't want to go to Ireland. Unless, maybe if I got to go in an airship, or if I went by regular ship while chasing pirates, or if I wasn't alone, if I was brought there by Peter Pan. This time hearing her voice aloud didn't make her braver at all. Peter Pan, she repeated bitterly. Peter Pan who only visited when I couldn't see him. Peter Pan who left his shadow and never came back for it. Who never came back for me. She turned her head to look out the window, but all she saw was gray. The same gray that was inside her head. The two reached out to each other, sensing like. Wendy closed her eyes, severing the connection, but it was all gray behind her closed lids. What had happened? Somehow her life had gone from heady days of playing games with Michael and John and telling stories about pirates to passing time until they came home. And then there were no more pirates anyway. Something had slipped out of her hands. There would be no pirates of any sort in her future. No fairies, no Peter Pans, no Neverland. Just banishment to another family in another drearily rear country. And then back home, the same social mistakes, misery in a crowd, boys who probably didn't like her anyway. She sighed and looked at Snowball. Pretty doggy, she said, giving him a pat. When they give you to me, they were only trying to make me happy. They really do think this nannying abroad, this gothic situation, would be good for me. But I don't want a gothic novel, Snowball. They're dreary. I suppose it could have been worse, like an arranged marriage. All right, perhaps this is going too far. It's really a bit more Charlotte than Emily. A serious introduction to a proper boy, then. She carefully moved Snowball so she'd give Nana a good petting too. I thought Peter Pan would be the proper boy for me, but all I have is a shadow of him. She paused for a moment, wondering if that sounded too dramatic. I really didn't think he was coming back, Nana, at least to fetch his property. It's a shadow, for heaven's sake. What's he doing without it? She went to the bureau and opened the drawer and regarded the black non-object that lay there unmoving, darkening the shapes under it. He mustn't need it anymore, she thought thoughtfully. He mustn't want it anymore, she added after another moment. Nana let out a sound somewhere between a growl and a chuff, almost like she knew what Wendy was thinking. Wendy herself wasn't sure what she was thinking. An idea was beginning just to form in her head. An extremely alien idea, but one that would open a place in the clouds even before it was fully formed, like a sigh that precedes great things. Things that did not include Ireland. Acquiring these things would be tricky, however. Apart from mass, nothing in Wendy's life was strictly transactional. Though certainly there were times when the boys were younger that she'd have to divide time into 5-minute slots so she could each have a turn playing with a favorite toy. And of course she often heard Mr. Darling going on about Mrs. Darling bought a new hat. They wouldn't be able to afford a new tea service. And her mother calmly agreeing to her father's never-ending surprise, for she was always practical underneath her lashes and perfume and quite good at maths. But the idea of worth, of trade, of something having value to someone else in a way that was useful to her, to Wendy, this was new and a little frightening. Here were the facts. Peter Pan didn't value his shadow anymore, apparently. But someone else might. No, scratch that. Someone else did. She wouldn't let herself think beyond this. She wouldn't let her mind chatter the way her mouth did, ruining everything. This time she would do. She looked around until she found the perfect thing. A delicate linen and lace envelope for keeping her nightgown that she'd done a pretty job of embroidering. She carefully scooped up the shadow, folded it, and slipped it in. What else might she need? A sewing kit, a tiny lady's knife, a muffler, a half-dozen extra hairpins, some strings, and some ribbons. She put all of this along with an envelope into a worn leather satchel and slipped it under her bed. Then she took out a pair of stockings and began to darn them, an innocent, useful task should anyone come upon her unexpectedly. Hours later, Michael and John returned home full of their usual youthful energy and droll remarks. Wendy neither remonstrated them or laughed softly. Her brothers remarked on her distracted nature. When Mrs. Darling came into the kitchen, it was with a tentative step and furtive looks. "How is your little pet?" She eventually asked. "What? Oh, he's absolutely adorable," Wendy said, remembering to toss Snowball a tidbit of mutton. For Nana, she reserved the bone. "You can take him with you, you know, to Ireland. He would be a delightful little travel companion." For a moment, just a moment, Wendy looked at her mother, really looked at her steadily and critically. "You would never send the boys away." The statement felt hard and final, full of more meaning than anyone that had been ever said in the kitchen before. "But they didn't write the fantasies," her mother said quietly. Then Mr. Darling came in, loud and blustery, talking up Irish butter and clean country air. Mother and daughter both ignored him. Wendy went to bed early that night, claiming fatigue. Since the sun had almost won its daily Sisyphean battle with the weather, the sky was light a long time before the air became heavy enough to supplely infiltrate thoughts with sleep. "Hook," she whispered, finally drowsing. "I have his shadow." And that's the end of that chapter. See you later.